Chapter 30, Early Life in NZ, Part 2. Following my return to New Zealand, after the air tour delivery to Bangkok, I had a discussion with Alf Coleman as to what he wanted me to concentrate on next. He told me that there was concern that the air tours were not being purchased by New Zealand flying training establishments. The development and initial production costs were not being covered by sales. In addition, the high level of competition from the major international producers of trainers such as Cessna and Piper were a worry. AESL were having to keep the price of the air tourer down to remain competitive, but this meant the aircraft were being sold at a loss. A considerable increase in sales in New Zealand and overseas was essential. This was only partially helped by the New Zealand 8 purchases which were going ahead, with 4 aircraft going to Thailand, 4 to Indonesia, and 2 to Singapore. Alf and I decided that I should carry out a tour of New Zealand to promote sales of all AESL products including aircraft, engines, instruments and other ancillary equipment. With the purchase of the Victor production equipment etc. we had also purchased the prototype air cruiser. This was an advance on the Victor, or Air Tourer series, being a 4-seater larger aircraft with a Rolls-Royce Continental 210 HP engine. This extra power gave the aircraft considerable increase in climb and cruising speed. The climb out on takeoff was around 1000 feet per minute and the normal cruise IAS was 125 knots. It was a good aircraft to fly around New Zealand and handled well, but it had no aerobatic capability and was not cleared for instrument flight. My tour of New Zealand airfields both in the North and South Island was carried out in the air cruiser, and I took with me the son of a neighbor who is keen to take up flying. In all we flew 25 hours flying time and covered customers from Hamilton down as far as Invercargill. Overall some 65 air tourers, or Victors, were sold in New Zealand, but this was way below the necessary to amortize production costs. Sales of other products, however, were quite reasonable, especially Lycoming aero engines. These engines were used extensively worldwide in the general aviation industry, and to have this agency was real bread and butter stuff to the agent. Not only were there engine sales, but the repair and overhaul agency for the engines was extremely valuable. The tour of New Zealand proved to me that extensive sales of the air tourer were going to be very difficult, mainly due to the problem of breaking the Cessna Piper lock hold, gained over many years. The setback was despite the fact that there was not a good 2-seater fully aerobatic aircraft available in New Zealand as good as the air tourer. There always appeared a built-in resistance to a home-based manufactured trainer. Why I do not know. I completed my tour and reported back to Alf Coleman. One success from the trip was that young Bruce Clark, who came with me, was sold on a flying career. He subsequently gained his wings at the Auckland Aero Club, later joining the R.A.A.F to become a Lockheed Orion captain, then joining Air New Zealand for a full career as an airline pilot. It had become obvious that AESL could not continue to produce the air tourer at such a heavy loss. In the meantime I converted ferry pilots on the aircraft which were to be delivered overseas. I also have briefed them and assisted them to prepare for the ferry flights to Indonesia, Thailand and Singapore. All the 10 aircraft were finally delivered without untoward incident. No doubt, as I did, they all had their moments on the long ocean hauls. Finally, the AESL board decided to cease production of the air tourer. Alf told me that regrettably, there was no longer a job for a pilot sales manager to demonstrate the aircraft. He told me that I had done my best and should he require someone in the aircraft sales field in the future he would be keen to have me back. So reluctantly, after only 5 months on the job I returned to Auckland. Fortunately, Gladys and I had not moved to Hamilton, although, before the job came into doubt we were within a whisker of buying a house, but the deal fell through. I was now out of work, but I had enough from my pension and savings to keep going for a while. Whilst looking for a new full-time job I got part-time flying with the Auckland Aero Club, a bit of instructing and charter work. The club had acquired a Cessna 310 twin-engine 6-seater aircraft for charter work. The pilot on the project was a very experienced operator indeed, a Captain Dick Atwood. A wartime Bomber Command Pathfinder wing commander and a former British Overseas Airways Corporation Boeing 707 captain, with 20,000 hours flying behind him. I flew as co-pilot to Dick on the 2 pilot operations and we had some good trips. The highlight of our flying tour was to fly the then Governor General and his wife, Sir Arthur and Lady Porritt. When they visited the Aero Club, we took them on a scenic flight around the Auckland area, finding them a most charming couple to fly. The part-time flying was not enough financially and I had to find a full-time job, which came, once again in the office furniture field. With an Auckland company closely associated with my former employer CRO Office Furniture. The company whose managing director, Hillard McMullen I already knew, offered me the job to set up an office furniture division in his Shaw's group of companies in central Auckland. Meanwhile I continued to fly part-time with the Auckland Aero Club. The arrangement I had with the CFI, Ross Dawson, was that anyone I introduced to the club to learn to fly I could train personally. This flying I enjoyed as I could take time to really look after my student and give them all the ground training they required as well. I stayed 2 years with Shaw's, but I always had my eyes open for another flying job. My parish with the company was confined to Auckland, which I got to know very well, both geographically and its business community. Office furniture is in every single office as we all know, and to work in this field takes you into a complete range of every sort of company, small and large. Whilst in no way fulfilling my wish for a career associated with aviation, it did complete my business training. I had learned quite a lot from Hillard McMullen, who, by hard work and a flair for salesmanship and marketing, had built up a profitable and effective company. In many ways he had the same flair for new ideas that Alf Coleman had in AESL, though the likeness ended, for in other respects of life they were poles apart. Hillard was deeply religious and heavily involved in the church, whilst Alf loved to enjoy life to the full in quite different ways. I was able to have a more stable social life whilst at Shaw's, with regular hours and virtually no out-of-hours work commitments. We were able to take leave regularly and visit Valerie and her family, who were now at R.A.A.F. a hack year. It is a base which I have always had an affection for, since I had first flown into it in 1957, when I had flown Will Fulton into the base in a Canberra after grapple at Christmas Island. It was these visits to a hack year that my active reserve training spells at Wigram kept me in close touch with the Air Force. I enjoyed the hack year, apart from the pleasure of being with Sean, Valerie and the children. It was good to be on a very active fighter base, with all that continuous flying going on. It was also fun to mix with the base officers in the mess and on the golf courses in the area. The nearby city of Palmerston North was also a bustling place and a center for a large Minorca province farming and business communities. My periods at RNZAF Wigram were also intensely interesting and gave me a lot of good flying. Jeff Wallingford, the OC flying, made sure I got to fly all the base aircraft. They had Devons and Harvards, which I, of course, had flown before. In addition, I was given helicopter dual instruction in the suit trainers. On one period of training, I was able to complete my 2 weeks with a day at a hack year. Sean was now engineering officer on 75 Squadron. When he first got there they had Vampires, but later on re-equipped with Skyhawks. One amusing incident was when I was introduced to young pilots who had just joined the squadron, when they still had Vampires. Sean asked me when I first flew a Vampire and I replied it was in 1947. The 2 young pilots were surprised at this, for I had flown the aircraft they were now flying on the squadron, before they were born. Later on, when the squadron was equipped with Skyhawks, I was given a 2-hour dual flight which gave me a good introduction to this fine aircraft. I was amazed at how easy it was to do rolls and loops. It had so much more power than any single-engined jet I had flown before. I think it was this constant keeping in touch with flying that stimulated my desire to get a full-time flying job again. In July 1973, my opportunity came to return to flying. James Aviation in Hamilton, next door neighbors to AESL, were looking for a sales manager and I applied for the job. Aussie James, whom I had known before at AESL, interviewed me for the post and the interview went well. He indicated that I would be likely to be selected to promote sales of the aircraft in the Beechcraft agency range. When I had not heard confirmation, I rang him and was very disappointed when he told me that another chap had got the job. However, somewhat guardedly, he told me to await further events, but did not elaborate. What had happened since I left AESL had a bearing on what Ozzy James hinted. AESL had merged with Air Parts Limited, the manufacturer of the Fletcher agricultural aircraft. The new company was New Zealand Aerospace, and the New Zealand government also had a large stake in it through a 50% shareholding by the then government airlines-controlled Air New Zealand and National Airways Corporation. The new company had now produced a prototype basic military trainer to meet a specification put out by the Royal Australian Air Force. This aircraft was designed from the air cruiser and was fully aerobatic and cleared for instrument flying. Ozzy James told me to ring Alf Coleman and talk to him as to how I might fit into the project. Alf told me to apply for the post of marketing manager, mainly to fly and promote the new air trainer, as the new aircraft was called. It was, however, necessary to go through the selection procedure to conform with board policy. I went to Hamilton and was interviewed, after which Alf told me I was the front runner. This was the reason Ozzy James told me to await further events. It appeared that they had realized that I would be much more suited to flying and promoting the new military air trainer, rather than the Beechcraft range at James Aviation. Shortly afterwards I was confirmed in the appointment, and once again I moved to Hamilton. By sheer good fortune, Mrs. DeLuan, my previous landlady, had just had a boarder leave, so I was able to once more board with her. I duly resigned from Shaw's office furniture and set out to face what was to become two of some of the most exciting years of my life.